Mr. Chairman, and
right.
thank you, Mr.
Here's
Ardeman,
Mr. Jennings.
for your kind remarks.
Oh,
My name is
looks
Bill
like Warren
Jennings.
Buffett.
I
Yes.
am, as Mr. Ardeman said, a senior director at Delta Consulting Group. I do have more than 40 years experience in conducting forensic accounting investigations, and was contacted by attorneys representing the board to conduct a forensic accounting investigation of the district. The only instructions I was given were that I was not to speak to the other experts who had been retained by the board, and that I was to conduct my investigation in a complete and independent manner without any
Unlike the Disney
interference
people.
from the attorneys or others. And so I was given pretty wide rein. I originally came out in August of this year and met with Mr. Gilzine and other employees of the district. And the primary purpose of that first encounter was to identify issues that myself and my team would then investigate. We sat down with a number of the employees of the district in that initial meeting. We gathered documents. We did a lot of independent research, and then
Is he the one who actually wrote that
developed a
introduction?
plan. We
I don't
identified
know.
certain issues that we
He may
thought required further investigation, and we developed procedures to investigate those issues. Those procedures included a
He's the
massive
forensic
collection
accountant.
of both hard copy and electronic data and evidence.
All
Also,
of which
we
is
did
on the
a lot of
district website
independent
now.
research, consulting, not only publicly available information, but other public records that were also accessed or available to us. We had, we also then, following those steps, we interviewed many employees of the district, and we worked on that second phase from September through the end of November, and spent a fair amount of time here at the district office, and also touring the entirety of the district to actually make physical observations and photograph the various manifestations of the district's responsibilities.
We're warming
including,
up here, guys.
roads, water control projects, utilities, and the like. We have a number of findings. They're included in a written report that we submitted to the attorneys on November 24th. It's quite extensive. It runs well past 80 pages in terms of its narrative. And then, of course, there are numerous attached exhibits.
78
So that's
to
even-
be
So I'm
exact.
not going to be able to go page by page.
That's even more than what
but
he
I
had
did want to highlight
released
some
before.
of the more significant findings.
Yeah.
One of the things we looked at were the use of American Express cards, district American Express cards
Oh, that's gonna
by
hurt.
district employees. We
That's real bad.
selected Mr. Classy and several other
That was
employees
the former administrator.
and got the records related to their American Express expenditures going back to 2021. We didn't find very much except with respect to expenditures by Mr. Classy. During the period from 2021 through 2023, Mr. Classy spent approximately $100,000 on what were described as public relations act, or sorry, not public relations, personnel relations activities. These would be a variety of parties in remembrance of staff that were past staff, current staff members who are being recognized for a variety of reasons.
I'll just point out that this
And
is
then
probably
also,
fine
in a
if he was
separate
working for
category,
Disney
spent
as a
about
Disney employee and not
$80,000
part of RCID.
on events. These
Correct.
included town hall meetings,
He's not a Disney
parties
employee.
for residents
That's
of the
the
cities
problem.
of Bay Lake.
Totally different. He's just bought
and
and
Lake
paid
Buena
for by the Walt
Vista.
Disney Company.
That's okay. That's
and
fine.
other related events, and then approximately $27,000 on entertainment. This included various golfing activities as well as local sporting events.
You cannot do this as a government employee.
Noted that the existing
it is straight up
written
illegal
policies and procedures related to District American Express expenditures
It's not
were
far
followed,
off.
except in one instance, but that essentially Mr. Classy had the ability to
Love that, Mr. Classy.
override any of the
Mr. Classy, his name was
procedures.
John Classy.
We then identified
With
another
an E.
more significant matter, which was this thing that Mr. Gilzine talked about related to
The IRS.
Disney park passes and
Yep.
discounts at Disney venues given to district employees. I think it's important to understand, and we didn't realize this at the beginning of our work, but actually originally all the district employees were Disney employees.
Yep.
There wasn't a separate district payroll until 1998.
Think about that.
And so these employees
Think about that.
had received as Disney employees, just as other Disney employees all received,
Which means this would have been an
park passes
Eisner
and
decision.
discounts at Disney venues.
Mm-hmm.
When
point,
the
Jonas.
separate
Not an
payroll was
Iger.
created, a process was initiated. We were unable to find an agreement that required this or supported this practice. But what Disney would do is it would calculate all of the amounts that were given to district employees in park passes and discounts, and then bill those back to the district, several $1 million a year. This is very important. And you know,
Misuse
again,
of public funds.
we have no opinions about
Also a
things.
crime.
Our job was simply to report the facts. But the fact is that in many
That's
other
gonna be good.
situations that I've investigated, you know, people
This is an
tend
expert
to
witness, people.
function in terms of their own best interest. And so one of the problems that we noted with the park passes and the discounts was that would give the district employees a sense of being beholden to Disney. You know, that they were receiving these things from Disney and would therefore owe some loyalty to Disney.
Yep.
They thought they were
The other
working for
problem, though,
Disney.
is a more immediate problem, and I raised it to Mr. Gilzine's attention when I first discovered it, and that is this notion that these benefits actually represented taxable income to the employees.
Oh, that's going to be so painful to
which
so
was
many
not
people.
to the IRS.
No. They're going to pay for
Now,
it.
this wouldn't have
They're
been
gonna pay
so
for
bad, except there were two district employees,
The district will pay
the
for
former CFO
Oh,
and
good.
the former
it.
resource
And bill it to
manager,
Disney.
who raised this issue back in 2018
Yeah!
with Mr. Classy, and were told that they should put aside their concerns and not raise the issue again, because the passes and the discounts were given to as a training device for district employees.
What?
Of course, that leaves out the fact
Right.
that
So
they
but you have to go to
also
the parks
included
to know
other
how to
household members.
do fire codes or
Um,
whatever while you're there.
And
That-
we
yeah, that
did
makes a
raise
lot of
this
sense.
issue, and Mr. Gilzine dealt with it very, very promptly in his own way. Another thing that we found related to the way that the district procured products and services.
Thank you, TLD
So this is
screwed
the
up. Thank you.
procurement process Mr. Gilzine referred to earlier. What we found was that there were very few written policies around procurement, and the ones that we discovered had some odd elements to them. For
It's
instance,
very bad.
I'll bet.
with respect to items that would be in total less than $200,000, the departments essentially could make their own procurement decisions. They did not have to follow
What?
any process that included the district's procurement department. The other thing was that
That's insane.
certain
up to $200,000.
types of products
They can
and
just
services.
put it on
And
the
of course,
car.
this was really at the discretion of the departments.
What?
Could be classified as a type A contract. And in that situation, the contract could be given to anyone that, among other things, the district or the department leader or department members felt good about.
Oh my God.
That's a very strange concept.
Oh my
of procurement.
God.
And the problem with that
Means
type of
since we're
process
picking a
is that it,
dude.
again, my other work over the past 40 years creates the opportunity for corruption. So in other words,
does
it
it?
creates
You
an
think?
opportunity for
You
people to
think?
receive gifts from vendors in exchange for their agreement to feel good about them. But there's a bigger problem here. And one of the things we also found was that even in the cases where the contract amounts exceeded $200,000, when they were put out to bid, they were put out to bid to a closed vendor list that had not been expanded in many, many years. And so it was essentially a closed loop. This creates that same problem. In other words, if you want to stay in the closed loop, you do what's necessary to make sure the department heads and the other department employees feel good. And that again raises the opportunity for corruption, bribery, that sort of thing, but also creates a bigger problem, which is it suppresses competition.
Yes.
And that
Yeah,
has
you
two
don't need that in
effects.
the
One
olive
is,
oil
from
business.
the district standpoint, as the victim of this, the products and services that you're receiving from this closed loop of vendors may not be the highest
Mostly
quality
Disney.
products and services that you could obtain. The other problem is that you may not be obtaining them
Self-healing.
at the best price, that you're paying a price that's higher than you would pay if you were able to obtain these things in an arm's length fashion. Further, a closed loop like that, especially in a large geographic area, suppresses competition. So you have no ability.
Well, Disney
for
doesn't have any
other
competitors in this
businesses
area.
to be able to participate
None.
in that
What competitors?
in that economic opportunity. And so they simply don't
Thank
come
you,
to the
Ron.
district
I
because they're not
appreciate you.
welcome. They're not in the closed
I
loop,
appreciate
and
Ron,
so
too.
by definition they're out. They're outside looking in. And so we thought that was a pretty
Quite a distance away,
significant
according
problem.
to the boundaries of Reedy Creek.
Another thing that we identified related to there's a project that's called the World Drive North Extension Project.
I know about that
And
project.
The World Drive North Extension Project essentially is designed to address some of these traffic problems that you were talking about.
Supposedly.
But part of it, part of this, the third phase of it in any case, requires there to be a crossing of 3 holes on a Disney-owned golf course. And so in a situation like that, there are 2 ways that you can go. You can either negotiate with the landowner,
which is what they did with Bonnet Creek when I represented
obtain
them.
the right to, use that land for the roadway, or you can go through
reasonable
what
people
I
do
would
that.
think of as a condemnation proceeding.
Eminent domain or combination.
Sovereign governmental unit
They
goes
have
to
the power
court
of eminent
basically
domain.
It's ridiculous.
to be able to access land
Most
is owned by
governments
private citizens.
right?
Just not
we
governments
talked to
held
a
by
number of
private
employees,
corporations.
and we looked at all the records that were available. As it turns out, this was a negotiated agreement between RCID and Disney, in which RCID agreed to pay $7.7 million for the cost of moving those 3 holes on the golf course. And in fairness, we were told by the employees that this was a great economic deal. But the one thing we didn't find anywhere was any sort of independent economic evaluation that had been performed by anyone.
No
to determine whether the 7.7 million
no
would
due
be the best way to
diligence.
proceed, or if it would have been better to go through a condemnation proceeding.
Eminent domain
Wow.
in the state of Florida has always gone
that
to an
regard,
outside
another thing that we
accounting firm.
found
You have to.
Always.
associated with
when we were negotiating with
roadways
Disney,
is that
we had an outside appraiser,
there were
right? Only
over
because this is
$21 million
did they go through
of
with no due diligence.
budgeted road improvements that were never made between
this is really
2020,
cartoonish.
I believe, and 2023.
This is honestly like beyond.
And we asked
simple.
about that, and we were told that
It's gone into
there
mustache
were,
twirl.
Environmental conditions and over aggressiveness by the head of the department that would have been responsible for making the improvements. But what we ultimately discovered is that that money actually became an $18 million surplus for the general fund, which is obviously a more easily accessed fund for other purposes that might be carried out under the auspices of the board, the RCID board. The other thing we found out, and this was also by direct observation, was that of the money spent, the money that was spent for road improvements were spent to improve roads that would be used by Disney customers. The roads that were not the roads that would be used by Disney customers were left untended.
So
and
they
fact,
neglected everybody else.
Independent evaluations
nice.
of their
very nice
of their current condition,
even though they pay
revealed
taxes.
a decline in performance or a decline in condition rather following 2017. Now there's a further problem with this because the district adopted an accounting methodology that essentially, without boring you with the details, requires.
I love it when a forensic
if you adopt this methodology, you are agreeing to maintain the assets that you are accounting for in this way in their best condition. And so if you fail to do that, you would likely be required to change the accounting method. And if that happened, that would have an impact on potentially on bond ratings and interest rates.
Gauging it there.
And so we thought that was
boom,
a fairly significant thing.
Here comes the MSRB.
The other thing that we identified
here comes
was
public
that
securities law.
There was
so that means they need to disclose that in their bond disclosures.
The way things work in accounting
this is what
when you're constructing an asset.
He's being subtle about it, but it's,
in other words, before it's completed,
right there,
you account for it as something called construction in progress, meaning that you don't depreciate it, and it's not viewed as an asset that is expected to produce anything until you complete it. We found a number of assets, so this would have been something tens of millions of dollars in construction in progress that had not moved out of construction in process since
talking about
2021.
The footbridge?
A lot of the records we were given were 2021 forward. Among these
that's a Disney problem. I mean, 6 years of construction on anything.
A very expensive, multi-million-dollar piece of equipment that was purchased for something called a Typhoon substation.
The Typhoon substation.
But the building that it was supposed to be housed in which it was supposed to be functioned had never been built, and so the equipment is sitting in a warehouse.
So it was a sham.
We weren't. A lot of the other equipment related to the utilities.
So they
and
were.
I'll explain why in a minute that we weren't able to do much with that. But a lot of the utility equipment
with
also
bond money.
Is in construction
that's a securities
progress
violation.
and has not moved to completed status. The problem with that, and of course, I've done a lot of work all over the world, especially with utilities, electric utilities. There's a huge, incidentally, nuclear power plant on the island of Taiwan that has an enormous amount of equipment. Billions
a guy
of
knows
dollars
shit
of
when he's
equipment
talking about
that is sitting there, becoming obsolete and rusting. Water's pumped through it, but it hasn't generated 1 volt of electricity. And so that's the problem, is that it's not like this equipment is, permanent, that it can always be placed into service. And so that's a concern with that as well. One of the things that we were asked about that produced an interesting answer, but it was not a problem for the district.
It was not a problem for the district.
Who was paying for policing in the district?
Oh, the police!
And as it turns out that when we first identified this issue in August, we thought the district was paying for policing. But of course, that would be forbidden by the district's, the RCID's charter.
That would be illegal.
And we did learn that, in fact, that charter had not been violated, that the policing was being paid for by Bay Lake and Lake Buena Vista. The problem is that the reason we thought it was a problem to begin with is all of that information, all that accounting information for the cities and for the district is actually in the same general ledger.
Oh,
so the same accounting records at the district.
What?
So the district does all the accounting.
The cities don't have any accounting records
for the policing
all in
payments.
The same ledger.
Those were all made from bank accounts that were owned by Bay Lake and Lake Buena Vista.
Wait, so RDIC has control over Bay Lake and Buena Vista's accounting records and bank accounts?
That actually, the district provides
bank accounts, but
all of the services for the cities, for Bay Lake and Lake Buena Vista, under an interlocal agreement that was entered into in 2022.
That's like Orange County
40-year agreement. It literally pays for everything that the cities require in terms of services except policing by the district. Now, the problem with that is not everybody in the district lives in Bay Lake or Lake Buena Vista.
No, there's only mobile homes
in fact,
there,
the people who live in Bay Lake, residents of Bay Lake and Lake Buena Vista, are either current or former Disney employees who were employed by Disney for more than 10 years and their family members. And so the people who aren't those people are paying taxes but not receiving the benefits because those are actually going to the residents of the cities. The other thing that we discovered was that the district actually has 8 utilities that, to a greater or lesser extent, provide critical services to the district. So naturally, we wanted to investigate the utilities to see, how they were set up, how they were operating, and perform the same sorts of procedures that we did with the other manifestations of the district. Unfortunately, I created quite the firestorm when I asked the human resources manager to set up an interview with the first utility employee. As it turns out, the utility employees are all employees of Disney. They are not district employees. And I discovered that actually there's not an easy way for Mr. Gilzine or other employees of the district to interact with the employees of the utilities. And we, in fact, were not permitted to speak to any of them, nor were we permitted to enter any of the physical manifestations of the utilities. One of the things I wanted to look at was the electric generation plant.
A violation of
the thing that I did discover indirectly was that actually the district generates no electricity from that plant.
What?
It's a cogeneration plant. The district generates no electricity from it. All the electricity in the district is purchased from third parties and delivered through the grid.
So they're
and I was asking,
their
why
bonds
are they
paying for electric grids
plant?
Without,
I was told by one of the district employees that the reason for the plant was that it would be there in case of emergency. Well, again, I didn't get to speak to anybody.
It's Disney's backup generator.
I certainly was not allowed to enter the plant.
What?
One thing I can tell you is unless it's generating electricity using gas turbines, the time to bring online any steam generated electric plant is significant. And so the extent to which it would be available in an emergency, in my opinion,
they have a
highly
big
questionable.
steampunk plant.
The one thing I will say, though,
so it's a taxpayer funded power plant that they don't have access to, that is not generating electricity.
and took great pains to get us the information that we were
regarding the bonds that were used
requesting.
to pay for that.
Someone needs to get access to that immediately.
And I found it to be an entirely
it's their plants,
an entirely cooperative.
They need a court order to go in there and get that
effective.
The bondholders should be going nuts right now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.